Spring is here. It's time to start thinking about family fun in the outdoors. This is Chris Williams promoting my good friends at Plaza RV in Bondurant. I've now bought 2 travel trailers from this locally owned company in the past 5 years. It's completely changed my family's life. We love spending time in the outdoors, tailgating, and most of all, being together. Camping has been an awesome escape for us, and I would encourage you to think about it as well. Head over to their lot in Bondurant. They have motorhomes, travel trailers, truck trailers, fifth wheels, and more. Check them out today at plazarv.com. They're 100% locally owned. Tell them that Chris Williams sent you.
Hey, happy Sunday. Welcome to Williams and Bloom, the Cinco de Mayo, if I can talk, edition on the Cyclone Phonetic Podcast Network. Brought to you always by Mechdyne, enabling discovery and so much more at Mechdyne. That is MECHDYNE.com. And speaking of discovery and intelligent people like they have at Mechdyne, this podcast got a huge upgrade. Williams is with his NASCAR brethren down in Kansas City. So we upgraded. We went to the Kicking It team, and we said, give me the professor. And that's not John Haycock. That is Jeff Woody.
Yeah,
Dr.
I was
Woody,
up.
How are you?
I was up till 2 a.m. watching dirt track racing, and I couldn't sleep, so I drank 2 pots of coffee, and then I had about it's a little Cody Road in the morning. It's watching the Braves. You can't.
You're just missing wrestling.
I mean, Stone Cold Steve Austin said he was going to come back, so Triple H.
And you need a Freddie got fingered something in there too.
That's the extent of my WWF knowledge. Like, I know a lot about a little, but I don't know much about that. So I apologize to all the Williams and Bloom listeners who are really expecting a lot of WWF stuff or WWE. Sorry.
I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised when they hear you on this. But no, Williams having a well-deserved day off, and the race is still ongoing as we record this here on Sunday evening. Williams got caught in a rain delay, so hopefully he's having I did not make it down there. I know it was a hot topic of conversation. I did not make it down to Kansas City, but I'm okay with that because now I get to hang out with Jeff Woody, and we're going to talk about a variety of topics here on the program tonight on your Sunday, May 5th, or listen to this on Monday. So kind of not a whole lot of news in the Cyclone Nation realm, Jeff, but behind the scenes, there's some stuff happening as it relates to the college football playoff as well as the NCAA tournament. And we'll get Jeff's thoughts on what is an ideal postseason. We'll talk about that in our Wiffles Hybrids Big 12 segment as Brett Yormark made some news this week in Scottsdale. Also get Jeff's thoughts on if his co-host, the great Kicking It podcast, by the way, you guys have been you're bringing in A-listers left and right.
Well,
who is sourcing all these guests, because you guys are killing it?
It's usually Mahoney. I'm chipping in a little bit on some of these in the next few. So we've got really fun guests. I don't want to tease too much. Logistics become a little bit hard when you're trying to line up really 3 people on our end between Aiden, because if Aiden wasn't here, boy, would this thing fall apart.
Aiden, say hello, because Aiden's the brains behind all this operation.
Thank you.
All right, now go away. That's enough.
Yeah.
But if Aiden wasn't here, the whole thing would fall apart. So then between Grant and I, and then lining up the host or the guest schedule. So it's usually a little bit of logistics, but it's usually Mahoney. But we've got some fun ones coming down the pike. We've got some more NFL coming down the road. We've got some from the coaching ranks that are coming down the road. We've got some from the strength and conditioning side coming down the pike. And obviously some more kind of players that we had fun with, and also some from the sports media side, from some certain specific 4-letter networks. So we'll have some fun guests for the rest of the fall, because I was like, when we were planning in football and basketball season, we're like, man, there's nothing to talk about from May to August. And we wanted something interesting. So yeah, we got some fun stuff going on.
That's all. Hey, you guys, it's been awesome. So speaking of that, I'm going to ask Jeff later in the program if Grant Mahoney was challenging K-State fans this week. You probably didn't see it because you're the smart one, not on social media. But he was challenging K-State fans to a field goal contest with any K-State fan. And we now have $100,000 on the table, Woody, between Mahoney, and whoever else K-State can bring to the table. The winning kicker gets $100,000 to the collective of their choice.
Oh wow!
So
this is actually a thing that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, maybe I've got people who are interested in supporting on our end, but should we be confident in Mahoney? I mean, he seemed very confident online, like we all are online, though. But I mean, I know Mahoney was a Division I kicker, so I want to get Jeff's thoughts. If Mahoney can Mahoney make a 50-yard field goal?
So here's the thing.
Because my concern would be, Woody, if K-State pops up a Grammatica, because there's like 8 of them that played there. I mean, can Mahoney handle them?
Are we then playing like horse, where you have to go back to like 52, yes. 54, 58? So here's the thing with Mahoney.
We're doing pig. I believe we're doing pig.
We would have in practice, there would be some just kind of stationary field goal stuff where they're just practicing kind of before. And then there's also kind of the pseudo live rep. So literally you do your kind of stretching, your warm up and during practice, and you would get done. And first thing you do is field goal, and you'd start at extra point, and then you kind of move it back like right hash on the 20-yard line, left middle, 25. You just keep backing it up. And then, Mahoney and Geyer would get it, or Cole Netton and Edwin Arceo, one of those guys would hit it. I think Mahoney, the further back you'd get him would be better, because he would get out of his own head. And so you could just, if it's 57 yards, you can just bomb it, just hit a nuke, whatever happens. And versus from 42, it's kind of like an 8-foot putt, where it's close enough that you kind of want to take you got to take your brain off a little bit, but versus like a 24-foot putt, I mean, big deal. If I don't make it, I don't make it. And so it's sort of like the further back he would get, the better he would get, because he'd get out of his own head, and he's still spindly wiry. So I don't know. Anything 50 to 58, I would say give him some warm-up time, a weekend to practice, and I'd feel very confident with him 50 to 58, especially if it's just on a tee, or whatever the little tripod thing is. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Well, and the Grammaticas are like 80 years old now, I think. So, I mean,
do they have any ACLs left? Is that okay? I don't know. Is there a more embarrassing injury in sports history than it was Martine, right?
It was Bill. I believe that was Bill Grammatica.
It was Billy? Yeah. For those that don't know, just Google Bill Grammatica ACL tear. Please, just do yourself some favor, because to me, it's the same level of dumb as when Randy Johnson exploded the bird. That was incredible. This is the same level of, wait, what? Did that really happen? But someone tearing their ACL. Horrible, but also, wait, really? So that's the same kind of video quality that you're expecting.
The good thing is he made the kick, though. So
yeah, if you're gonna go down, go down. Like
you're gonna go down a winner. So all right, well, let's get into this. The news this week, and a couple quick newsworthy items on the Iowa State end. A couple transfers did commit. Iowa State got a cornerback this week from Blinn Junior College, young man that will provide some depth there. So good job by Coach Hooger and the staff. And then the women's basketball team just picked up a post transfer from UMass for some depth behind Audie Crooks. So both squads doing good in the portal. Not huge names, but names that will help out. So good news on that front. Now, let's go back to the revenue side now. So this week there were Big 12 meetings and college football playoff meetings down in Scottsdale, because, why meet on Zoom when you can go to Scottsdale? That's what I'm saying.
Is the golf down there as good as, is the golf down there as nice as I think it would be?
Yes. Yeah, it is expensive. It's expensive, though.
I hit Ankeny Golf and Country Club for the first time today. Beautiful
What'd
course.
You think?
Beautiful
yeah, nicely
course.
Done. Yeah,
I like that straight. Place. Nothing straight.
The problem, and if anybody's listening to the Ankeny Country Club, the waiting list is like 2 years long. I'd like to join. I mean, not that I'm anybody, but I can't. I'm on the waiting list. So maybe if I say I know Jeff Woody, that'll help.
You got to grease some hands.
Yeah, that's right. So your mark this week, a couple of things that came out of this, and that is really in the postseason situation for both football and basketball. So it kind of went behind the radars right in the middle of basketball season. So I'm not sure how many Iowa State fans realized it, but there was an agreement in January, Jeff, on the future of the college football playoff. And essentially now the SEC and the Big Ten strong-armed the other two conferences that are around anymore, and that's the ACC and the Big 12. And the revenue distribution, which is up until 2026, it was split evenly across all the power conferences. The Big Ten and the SEC said, no. We've had way more schools. That is not fair to us. We need more money. And they won. So now, when the new contract kicks in 2026, the Big Ten and the SEC will get 29% of the revenue from that contract, which amounts to, and just keep this in mind, is this is real money here, that amounts to $22 million per school in those two conferences. I mean, this is big time dollars. The ACC will receive 17%, which amounts to about $13.5 million per school in the ACC. The Big 12 will be around 15%, which is $12 million. So if you're a mathematician here, the Big 12, because of this formulaic breakdown, which they use based on how many teams have made the playoff in the previous 10 to 12 years, Iowa State, for example, is going to lose roughly $8 to $9 million per year based on this new formula. That's not great, because that's $8 to $9 million that Iowa State was counting on. So, therefore, the talk of these other conferences is, hey, should we think about expanding the playoff, which expands to 12 this fall, to something larger? Is that 14? Is it 16? Is it beyond in 2026 when that new contract steps in? Because Jeff, as you know, this is a money game. And the other thing hurting the Big 12, and again, I'm not sure how many of the casual fans know this for Iowa State, but Iowa State has taken a bit of a revenue hit this coming year for the next 5 years because they took on those 4 new Pac-12 schools, but the pie from TV didn't grow. And so you're eating that pie 4 extra separate directions. So you're basically losing another, don't quote me exactly on this, but $6 to $8 million per year from that. So Iowa State, between the college football playoff revenue difference and adding the 4 schools, which hopefully will benefit you down the road, but it won't in the short term revenue wise, you're talking about $15 to $20 million Iowa State was counting on that it's not going to get. And so why do I say that? This is why the Big 12 schools, specifically Brett Yormark, is interested in protecting his schools, and he wants to potentially expand both the college football playoff, Jeff, but also then March Madness and the NCAA tournament, because the more teams you get, the more TV revenue you get, the more chance you have to advance teams, the more money you get. So let me ask you, as a former high-level football player at this level, what is the perfect recipe for the postseason in both college football and college basketball?
Well, the difficult thing with all of this is objectively the SEC and the Big Ten have had more success in the actual metric of wins and losses in the playoff.
That's a fact.
And that's the hard part is you don't really have a leg to stand on more than like, hey, what the hell, dude? Like, that's pretty much the argument that you have. But on the flip side of that, I think there's I've talked about this before. I don't remember if it was on this one or if it was on our show on Kicking It, which comes out every Tuesday. I called it the transitive property of giving a shit. And the transitive property of giving a shit is when you're watching just a random game on a Saturday, and it's Oregon State versus, which RIP Oregon State's hard playoff chances. So let's pick a different school. Yeah. Wake Forest versus Florida State. And why would I watch Wake Forest versus Florida State? So let's say it's in the middle of October. Iowa State is 6-2. Florida State 6-2. And you go, oh, Florida State might be a team that Iowa State matches up with in a bowl game or the playoff or whatever. Or they might be a team you're competing with for a playoff spot. So I'm going to care. You don't consciously make this like A to B to C. It's just I then care about Wake Forest versus Florida State. And I'm going to tune in at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night after Iowa State's game's already done. All the other Big 12 games that I really care about are done. And I watch that game because it has some impact on me as a fan of Iowa State. Well, do you really do the same thing for, say, North Dakota State versus South Dakota State? Arguably a game that has, Florida State might not be the right example for this, but Wake Forest and North Dakota State, if they played 10 times, North Dakota State wins 6. So it's better football watching North Dakota State versus South Dakota State, but they play at a different level from you. And so I don't really care. It doesn't affect me as the team. I don't have a rooting interest to have the transitive property of giving a shit. And so for those that don't remember math, like high school math class, transitive property is if A equals B and B equals C, therefore A equals C. So like it's just across the board. So one of the things that's interesting that the SEC and the Big Ten don't understand is, or seem to not understand, is playing your leverage. Yes, you absolutely need to play your leverage in business when you have leverage. But the problem is the leverage that you're playing is like trying to hack off one of the legs of your table because you can. Well, that makes the table less steady. So if you're trying to play the leverage that you have, which is we need more teams and the Big 12 and the SEC are all that matter and there's more success, and then you try and slowly cripple the other ones so then you get a bigger piece of the pie, you now are cutting off. So let's say 7 years from now, the Big 12 and the ACC are deprived of $20 million a year, in addition to the TV contracts between Fox and whatever. They then lose competitive balance, and the Big 10 and the SEC say, you know what, we're splitting off, we're going to do our own thing. I'm not watching that. As an Iowa State fan, I mean, granted, if I'm just a college football fan generally, which there are very few of those, I'm not watching that. And so when you start sectioning off big chunks of the country, and yeah, USC and UCLA and Cal and Stanford, they're in the Big 10. Their fans loosely care about the teams that they're even rooting for, let alone the other ones. And so what I think is being really short-sighted on this is that when you start to play the advantage just for two conferences and excluding all the rest of the conferences, you start to lose the monetary value of what that thing is worth in the first place. Because if, let's say there's in any given Saturday, there are 100 million eyeballs watching college football broadly spread across all the networks. Most of those eyeballs are watching their own team. Like if you then add all the MAC schools and all the Big 12 schools and all the SEC, whatever, of those that are watching the SEC and the Big 10, it's actually only probably about 30%, I would guess, of the college football eyeballs broadly across the country. 30% of that pie isn't that big, relatively speaking, to the numbers that they're expecting to make. So ESPN's shelling out $1.3 billion over the next, 5-10 years?
Yep.
For the product that they're expecting those eyeballs to come back, because how do they make that money? ESPN spends $1.3 billion because they get a product that they think that people are going to then tune into to watch. They then take that product and turn to Allstate and Miller Lite and whatever and say, hey, we have all these eyeballs. You want access to these eyeballs, right? Pay us $2 billion in total, and we're going to keep the difference, because that's how ESPN makes their money. They buy rights, sell those rights, or sell advertising on those rights. Well, what happens when they pay $1.3 billion and then viewership actually starts to drop because they've siphoned off these other programs that no longer have access to the thing that they're trying to sell with the playoff and access to the higher level competition, like the group of five's already getting sucked out of? When instead of $2 billion, and they say they take it to Miller Lite or Miller Anheuser-Busch or whatever it is, whoever owns them, and they go, hey, look at these viewership numbers that we have. You want to pay us $10 million every month for the next 5 years or whatever. And Anheuser-Busch goes, these are down from 2 years ago. Our contract value from 2 years ago was $7 million. You're asking us for 10. We'll give you 5. And so all of a sudden the numbers start to go down. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a really dangerous game that the Big 10 and the SEC are playing, not because of a short-sighted view. It absolutely makes sense to do what you're doing right now. And I've used this example before as far as short-sighted individual decisions making total rational sense being bad for the long term, is if everybody, when they're leaving Hilton Coliseum, said, you know what, it would be faster for me to just leave. I'm not going to let anybody in. I'm going to just, as soon as there's an opening, I'm going to floor it. And then if every single person had that decision, if no one decided to let anybody else in, no one moves. Nobody gets out. So it's a rational individual decision to think that I'm going to get out of Hilton Coliseum if I just drive. Makes sense in the moment, but it actually then hurts everybody, because if everybody has that thought. So the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the SEC trying to Smaug hoard all this money, it makes logical sense now, but it is really, really teetering with disaster if they do it too much further. So I understand your Mark's position, and I feel like he actually has ground to stand on, if not now, then a few years down the road, when and if the viewership numbers start to change and Iowa State fans stop caring, and, fill in the blank ACC fans stop caring because they're not going to be involved in it. So I think, the argument for doing it right now and saying you need to involve us more or give us a bigger piece of the pie, you don't have a lot of legs to stand on, but you do need to consider the future of the sport, because if ESPN wants to make their money back, who is really the money behind this whole thing, they're the hand pushing the chips, they have to consider what's going to happen 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And I don't think that picture is super rosy unless they fix some things.
Yeah, it's crazy. So hold on, let's bring Aiden here. Aiden says we have some breaking news.
Iowa State just landed another commit.
Hey, oh, I knew that. Oh, all right. Lily Hansford, Oregon State. She's
a shooter, right?
lefty. Oh yeah, on the board.
Oh boy. Can we talk? Can we put a pin in the media conversation to just talk about this women's team, this upcoming women's team?
Yes. Hold on, real quick. Give your guys Kelderman some shout outs. They are the sponsor of the Kicking It podcast. You guys are growing exponentially, and Kelderman's along for the ride here.
You ever met Jeff Kelderman?
I have. Man, that guy needs a sitcom.
He's a delightful person.
Yes. Wonderful. He is wonderful.
You and him are kind of like similar in stature. We're like not like he's somewhere between you and I as far as like height's concerned. And I said this before, like absolute steel trap handshake. Just you can tell that he works with his hands. It's like my dad was a farmer and a wrestler growing up. And so you can tell, like when my dad you shake my dad's hand, it is absolutely, it's like shaking the hand with like a bear. Kelderman, small bear, but still a bear.
Yes. Speaking of handshakes, I shook JT Rock's hand yesterday at a function.
Was it like holding like a baby when they like grab your finger and they kind of like get all their fingers around it? Was that similar?
Well, if he talk about a massive individual and an awesome kid, there's a picture out there on social media of me standing next to JT Rock, and it looks like the Danny DeVito, character standing next to Manute Bowl. Yeah, I know. Hey, I was for it, and I made the mistake, Woody, of standing on my tiptoes, thinking that it wouldn't be captured. Well, you can very clearly see in the picture that I'm standing on my tiptoes, and as somebody said, Bloom, that is like putting a Band-Aid over a gushing wound. I was like, there you go.
Oh, poor buddy. Oh, and there's it's even stripes. So Aiden just pulled up the picture. For this isn't the audio listeners, I'm just going to describe this too. So there's even stripes across the polos around like chest level ish. The Iowa State's above that. And there's stripes across there. You have Milan on the left. Looks like Kelderman all the way on the right. That's Cade Kelderman.
Yeah, that's Cade Kelderman. No relation.
JT Rock.
No relation.
You are at the stripe of JT Rock's polo across his chest. It's like
that's right.
You must be this tall to ride, and you can get on the Milan Momcilovic ride. You can get on the Cade Kelderman ride, but you can't ride the JT Rock ride yet.
Well said. So speaking of that, I ran into some of my friends from Farm Bureau there. They were there, sat with them. They were great. So my guy Corey Harklaw was there. Anyway, they work with Colin Newell. And they said, man, Call Newell's going to run our company someday. I was like, I believe you. Call Newell, look him up. It's going to save you a bunch of money on your insurance. And Farm Bureau, just great people. We had a great night, Jeff. So we raised, it was a Make-A-Wish dinner. That's where those guys were. So we had JT Rock, Cade Kelderman, and Milan from the basketball team. And this is the cool part. And I'm learning something. So we had 3 football players, Jaden Higgins. We had Jim Boniface. And we had, who's my third? Bo Freeler was there. But they're all 3 of those guys, good for them, are dating volleyball players. And so they each had a date night, courtesy of the We Will Collective at the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So it was Kirsten Schmidt. We had Morgan Brandt was there. And, I'm drawing a blank on the third. But anyway, awesome time. But the guys from Farm Bureau were there, dedicated a lot. And so we gave away for the collective a shoot-around with the men's basketball team. And the winning bid was over $8,000, which was very cool. So
does that come with like shooting pointers from any one of the offensive coaches?
I just think you can get one from the players. This is players only. So was very excited about that. So it was an awesome night. What a great organization, Make-A-Wish. And really those folks are supporting We Will. Yes, you're getting transfers all over the place, which is very helpful. Thank you. But also doing some real impact, which is appreciated. One other quick note on that. And again, a little PR for ourselves here. We're in the middle of Membership May, Jeff Woody. Anybody that joins, we're trying to get 200 new members for the We Will Collective this May. If we get to 200 members, we're going to unlock a donor. Anonymous donor gave $200,000 to us if we can get 200 new members. And it can be as little as $10 a month to be a member. We've got 7 signed up in the first day. Help us out. WeWillCollective.com. Join the club, be a member, and we can unlock some more money to unlock some more money for that women's basketball team, who is going to be completely loaded, Jeff Woody. We've got Audie, we've got Addie, we've got General Ryan is back. and they are just surrounding them with snipers left and right. This team, I'm going to say it, I think this team's going to have the highest expectations for an Iowa State women's team since, let's throw it back to 2001, 2002. I think this team's going to have better expectations than even the one 2 years ago that had Ashley Jones. That's how good this team's going to be.
Well, I think it's more complete, like there's more offensive diversity. And so like you just talk about like roster construction, because I like as a general hobby, not necessarily talking about roster construction, but just things that are intentionally designed. Like when you go into a restaurant and you know exactly where to walk up to, and there's a host stand, and they're very quick. They can take you to the table that they need to immediately. Then there's a server that comes out there and walks you through whatever kind of thing. It's not that that place spends more money necessarily. They just do it more intentionally. And so thinking of just anything that's intentionally well designed, like a car or a restaurant like that. Roster composition is another thing where you can tell the ones that are intentionally designing with it. And Coach Fenn and that entire staff, exactly what they're trying to do, because Audie Crooks and Addie Brown being your two players that can play in the post, with Audie being obviously, but I mean, top 2 post player in college basketball next year.
She's going to, I don't think that's top 5 for sure.
Top 5, top 5 easy.
The Stanford person went to USC now. So the one that ate Iowa State alive is now at USC. Interesting.
That's USC. Low-key might be the number 1 team in the country.
Yep.
But anyway, so you have those two with Audie and Addie that are going to be able to play down. And then if you have as sharpshootery as they have because you think of Kelsey Jones, Ariana Jackson, she's a 40% three-point shooter. Emily Ryan, don't leave her open. She'll be in the mid to upper 30s, I bet. And then you add more shooters, like the gal that we just got from Oregon State. You have more. How many? Is it 5 shooters that are 40% plus from 3?
Plus Mackenzie Hare from Marquette and Sydney Harris from TCU, all above 40 last year.
And the winner of the high school 3-point contest coming from Johnston.
Right.
So you have 5-6 players that are going to shoot 36, 37% or more. Who are you helping off of to dig down on Audie Crooks? You have to leave her one-on-one. Because if you help off of anything, so I bet in this offseason, they're working with 2 things. Because Addie Brown's already really good at this, at like court vision. I bet they're working working with 2 things on Audie Crooks. One is on the defensive end of being able to stay down and kind of move around a little bit better. Just because of how offensively dominant she is, they kind of gave her license to, like, I don't want to say like loaf, but not put as much effort in the defensive side.
Don't get in foul trouble.
So defensive side, and then passing. Like if you can be the entry point and then find where the kick out's going to be, good luck defending this women's team. Because you have to play one-on-one with Audie Crooks, because if you don't, any one of the other 4 players is at least a 37% three-point shooter. So if you help off with anybody and she has the capacity to find them, there's an open 3. Analytically, this team is a nightmare to defend coming up this year.
I don't know what you do, because then Emily Ryan's good enough to get to the paint herself too as a dribble driver. She's gonna have some
and I think AJ
numbers.
I think AJ is going to do the same thing. I think both of those are going to be, because she gets another year of learning from Emily. So you have AJ and Emily Ryan, which are going to be your primary ball handlers probably. And God, and then you look at the men's team too. Like this is going to be. I mean, you've been an Iowa State fan longer than I have. I grew up an Iowa fan, then recruiting happened, and I could not stand Iowa. But is this the highest expectations combined for the basketball programs ever?
It has to be combined, because here's what people forget about 2000, 2001, when the women's program had some insane expectations. They were picked to win the Big 12. They were top 10 for a couple of years there, 2000, 2001, 2002 in the preseason. However, at the same time, that 1 year that was dominant for Iowa State men's basketball, the 2 years, the first year, that second year of Larry Eustace, they were picked last in the Big 12, and they surprised everybody. Tinsley, nobody knew about. Michael Nurse, Cantrell Horton, and then Pfizer was a young guy. They really came on. The next year, they were picked in the top 25, but nowhere near the top 10. Both of these programs are going to be in the top 10 to start the year. That has never happened before.
The men are probably going to be 3 to 5 somewhere.
3 to 5. Yep.
And the women 13,
Seven-
15,
se-
somewhere in there.
I bet with these, once this comes to fruition, I'm going to say 8, 9, 10. I really think that.
Boy,
Because there are a lot of teams that lost a bunch. Now you're going to have your Titans that are always going to be up there. USC is going to be up there, as we mentioned. You're going to have South Carolina will still be up there.
UConn, South Carolina,
Texas will still be up there.
I was probably going to be up there. They replaced.
They're going to be. They'll be right. I
will
would
they
say
finish there?
Iowa State,
No.
Yeah, Iowa State's had a better offseason than Iowa has.
For sure.
I mean, it's interesting. Back to the portal world, I would say, I don't know this for sure, the Iowa State women and the Iowa women were working with fairly similar budgets for the portal. They spent it on one player. Iowa State has spent it on 5 players. And is that one player probably the best, the one Iowa got? Arguably. Although I think Mackenzie Harris would challenge that, just my personal opinion. But Iowa State was able to not only get a great shooter, but then surround it with other role players as well. And I think what we're learning is in the portal, you can get one really good player and it's going to cost you a bunch, but sometimes it's a sum of everything. And I think that's what both of these programs have done in this offseason is just get a bunch of great contributors that can all help. And I would say, I think the Iowa State men had an A offseason. I think the Iowa State women have had an A+. I really do. I don't think it could have gone any better. You've got depth, you've got shooters, and you're giving a bunch of just weapons to build around Audie Crooks. They are not going to be able to be defended. I am very bullish on the Iowa State women. So speaking of that, back to the postseason conversation. Where the other topic that got brought up in Scottsdale was, should we expand the NCAA tournament? Right now it's at 68 teams for both. There is discussion of expanding that to potentially 78 or 84 here in the next couple of years. And here's why, Jeff. The first blush, you go, what are we doing? Why are we touching the best thing ever in sports? But coaches are for it. Coaches get judged based on how they do in making the NCAA tournament. And then secondly, the numbers for TV are so different between the NCAA tournament and the regular season. An average regular season game will get 600, 700,000 viewers. An average NCAA tournament game, even a first 4 game, even those first round games are getting 6 to 7 million viewers. So there is interest for everybody to make more money by having more teams because the casuals will not watch the regular season. The casuals will watch the NCAA tournament. So they're trying to get more money, clearly, because if you're the Big 12 and the ACC, you're going to be behind $15 to $20 million per school to your conference brethren. Compensation of players is coming soon. You need every dollar you can get. And so I think at first blush, you go, Yormark, this is an error. Why would we want to expand the NCAA tournament or the college football playoff when we've just expanded a couple years ago? Well, the Big 12 is going to be up against it revenue-wise. And if you want to compete for the best players, unfortunately, it's going to come down to how much do you have in NIL. And so this is what all these schools are looking at right now. Is that good for the health of the sport? Probably not. But again, back to your point, Jeff, people are looking out for themselves first and foremost.
Yeah, and so with the NCAA tournament, I think the natural thing is like, why are we inviting more teams? 15 years ago, I don't know when it started to die, but remember back in the olden days, the good old halcyon days of the CBI and the NIT, and back when there was less teams around and less television coverage, that you kind of had, like, you went and watched what you watched, and the people cared about the NIT, like they would hang a banner for the NIT or the CBI. You get in the CBI. Now no one cares. And
True.
So if you're thinking of a television product as well, like our friends Kansas State and Iowa that played each other in the NIT, even the most ardent fans, that was happening at the same time as the NCAA tournament. Like, even the most ardent Iowa and Kansas State fans are flipping back and forth between that game, which is their postseason, and some random game between like Western Michigan and Kentucky,
Right.
that no one cares about other than their particular fans. So like, this is the NCAA tournament is one of those, and I would say golf is actually pretty similar in this, where you and I are big golf fans. Numbers have been down for golf this year because the stars have left. But in a normal year, even independent of the Live, PGA, Rift, and all the people leaving or whatever, people will watch the Masters, the U.S. Open, the PGA, and the British Open. They're going to watch those 4. If you played golf before, kind of, and then everything else kind of doesn't really matter. So what the PGA tried to do is they then tried to make what are called elevated events, which is sort of like a half step between the Masters and everything else, where they then incentivize the purses get way bigger, like Waste Management in Phoenix, which was that was a shit show this year.
Yeah.
But Waste Management in Phoenix, or the WM, they then make the purse bigger, and they say that you have to go to this certain amount because they're trying to draw in everybody to those events because viewership is dwindling everywhere else. So with the NIT dying and no one really caring about the NIT, that's sort of like the other 30 events in the PGA Tour. So rather than having 30 average events, what if we just had 15 really good events that draw a ton of people? Then they're having PGA elevated events. That's why you take basically the NIT and the CBI teams and just push them in the NCAA tournament. They're going to weed each other out anyway. The nice thing about a single elimination tournament in basketball, where now, granted, you wouldn't do this because it wouldn't really happen because you now start having to like an 18 seed playing a whatever, is those teams will weed each other out, and it can happen in a day where you go from 128 to 64 because everything, or 2 days, where it just one round in one game, you can instantly remove teams. So I don't think it's that bad of an idea to necessarily add a few teams on the front side of it, because you do have those viewership numbers. You just kill the NIT and the CBI because no one really cares anyway, and then fold those teams in as a 17 seed. That cool, you got in as a 17 seed. Now you got to play Purdue. Good luck. Like that's sort of the congratulations. You made the tournament. You ain't going to go very far, but you're in the tournament.
Well, and the problem is, and the argument is, well, that devalues the regular season. And one could argue that we are devaluing the regular season anyway, because I don't know. It just seems like we're going down a path where the dollar matters the most. And until somebody steps in and says enough is enough, you need to have the dollar. You cannot compete in this world without more money. And it just makes it very difficult for these commissioners because if you don't do it and your other buddy that's the commissioner of the other conference is going to go do it, then you're going to be the one left behind. And so, selfishness has to step in. Is it for the good of the sport? I'm not sure, but there is no question that TV viewers are bigger for the college football playoff and for the NCAA tournament. It's not even close. It is like 5x for a regular season game for both those. And so the more of those, honestly, it's a lowest common denominator situation where you're not worried about your diehards like you and me. You're trying, how do you attract Joe Average down in Kentucky to watch a game? And it's you put something behind it that means something. Joe Average in Kentucky is not going to watch Iowa State versus Baylor, but they will watch the NCAA tournament just because that has the branding behind it. It's silly, but this is where we're going.
What I would say is, as far as a devaluing of the regular season versus a valuing of the regular season, I think that it doesn't change it as much as what some doomsday would think. Because let's say we have a 78 team NCAA tournament. If you're in the bottom majority of that, I don't know how the bracket would, I'm not going to map this out, but let's say 78 to 56 would have to play on the first day. And so logistically, how this would line up is you'd have to play Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and where you'd then, or Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So you'd have to play 3 games in 3 days on very quick turnaround of scouting somebody else, which is why NC State was such a crazy story, because like NC State and UConn were the only 2 teams in the last like 20 years that have made it from that first 4 beyond to, and UConn wasn't even a first 4. They were just an 11 seed that went on. Because you then have to play 3 games really, really quickly. If you're towards the middle to bottom portion of your conference in the regular season, you then are at risk of having to play 3 games to even get to the second weekend. And one of those games is probably going to have to be against a UConn or an Iowa State or a Houston or a Kansas. So seeding matters a lot, that you need to be in those top 6 lines, because if you're not in the top 6 lines, when we start adding 57 people, you then have like the top 4 seeds, 5 seeds, whatever, are going to get a bye. So they only have to play 2 weeks. or 2 games before you get to the second weekend. So it doesn't devalue the regular season as much. It makes seeding much more, which we already bitch about seeding enough. So it's going to make it extra fun. So there just has to be a little bit more clarity on what you're looking for. But on the flip side, like in the football aspect, if we expand the playoff, again, so in the NFL, how many undefeated regular seasons have there been in NFL history?
Two.
72 Dolphins and 2018, 2008 Patriots, whatever it was, 2008 Patriots. That's it. And every other NFL season has had a champion that has lost several games. Sometimes there's a one-loss team, several games. But as an NFL fan, if you are a Packers fan who generally Packers have a shot at going to the playoffs, going to the Super Bowl. If they lose a game here or there, you don't really jump off the viewership bandwagon because you expect a loss to happen and you still expect to be able to get in. In the BCS era, when there was just 2 teams and it's week 4 and you're USC or Notre Dame or whatever, and you lose a game and you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm done. I don't care anymore.
Yep.
So then you stop watching those games. Well, if you as an avid or a pseudo-avid, an average Notre Dame fan, and you're going to jump off the bandwagon, why would John Q. Public from Kentucky care? And so then if you're ESPN, you don't have as much of a prize to sell. So the numbers are going to go down worse. Well, now if there's a 12 or a 14 team playoff, let's take the 12 team playoff. We kind of know what the bracket would look like. A 14 team playoff, I was sort of just trying to like sketch it out beforehand. The top 2 teams would get buys. And then the rest of it would look more or less like the NCAA tournament where like an 8 would play a 9, 7 would play a 10, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So in this case, the top 8 seeds would get home games. And then, so 1 and 2 would have a bye. And then 2 or 3 through 8 would play a home game against the lower seeds. The winning team of that would go up. And then the lower seed of that plays another home game. So if you are a Iowa State fan and Big 12 is a 2, maybe a 3-team league, depending on how the thing shakes out, and you lose a game here or there, well, you're still locked in. You still want your team to do really well because you might get a home game. So you might be one of those 8 teams that gets a home playoff game in the first round, and then there's 8 more playoff or 6 more, whatever it breaks out to be. There's more home games in the next round because logistically it would be impossible to have neutral sites everywhere. So all of a sudden, the regular season matters more for everybody throughout the entire length of the season because you don't have even now with last season with the 14 playoff, you lose 1 game. Georgia lost 1 game. Georgia was arguably the best team in the country. They lost 1 game and they were out. Now, granted, it was the last game of the year and they didn't have a lot of time to fall off the bandwagon. Alabama fans, they almost jumped off the bandwagon. They got back on the bandwagon in week 6. Yeah. So good point. Yeah. There are the regular season matters more. It's just going to matter in a different way, more like the NFL and less like college football of old, where every single game matters. And if you lose, screw it. So I think we're not in such a doomsday situation. But what I do fear, like I said, it's not 1 year, 2 year, 5 years down the road that becomes a problem. It's when it becomes 15 or 20 years and there's no adjustment made. So when I said the perfectly rational individual decisions, there's another anecdote. There's a podcast that I really like to listen to. It's called Cautionary Tales. It's a Pushkin podcast, Malcolm Gladwell's thing. And he was talking about how there is a battle in the 1400s. It was the battle to start the 100 Years' War between France and England. And there was the knights that are all about nobility and, being the bravest person. And so they're on the front lines and they're trying to get to a battle and they're walking and they're trudging and they're on the front lines. Well, then everybody kind of the support staff is bringing the cannons and the food and whatever, and they're coming behind. Well, nobody gets the indication that you need to halt. So this back line is kind of encroaching upon the knights, and the knights want to be the ones that are out in the front. So they look back and see people creeping up on them, and they just keep moving forward. And then they look back and these people are like, well, hey, shit, stop. I got to catch up with you. And all of a sudden you sort of keep inching and no one ever stops. So perfectly rational decision of I want to be out in front, and that person in the back's being I need to catch up to you. So it's not a problem at the moment that you're doing it. It's a problem where eventually you're going to run that into a ledge and you're just going to fall off. And so what happened in that battle is that they just unpreparedly walked into a battle and got slaughtered because they didn't know that what they were doing. The SEC and the Big Ten, when they continually try and push out in front, and the Big 12 and the ACC have to continually try and boomerang and catch up, eventually that tether is going to snap and everything's going to fall apart. So like, I don't feel like that will happen because there's way too much money to be on the table. So as soon as if these numbers start to dip, that I think, like, I've seen the idea floated where there's the football programs essentially consolidate to like 50 or 60 or whatever schools and pop off into being their own league. That will happen before college football dies because there's too much money to be made. And if that happens, which I think eventually will, then you have one governing body. The reason why the NFL is as profitable as it is because the NFL negotiates their TV contracts. The Packers don't, the NFC North doesn't, the AFC East doesn't. The NFL negotiates on behalf of all of the teams because competitive balance is what you're selling. So in this case, that organization, call it CFB 2.0, they then negotiate with ESPN and Fox Sports and Amazon and whatever, and then split the rights amongst everybody. And there's still going to be, I want more and you want more, and fine. We've set up incentives for that, but it's collective negotiations so that the individual decisions, the knights on the front line, and the group decisions of the people on the back line understanding the thing to stop, those two things will eventually line up when it is better for me if we all do well. Because right now, it's only better for me if I do well. So if once the incentives eventually change, which it will when these football programs pop off into their next 50 or 60 teams, that will make sense then for my best decision to be what's best for us. But until that happens, it's going to keep being this arms race where I'm just going to make as much money as I can.
Well, it's all going in parallel with the NIL thing as well, because there are no caps on NIL. So you are at an advantage to gather as many resources as you can from an athletic department standpoint so you can distribute accordingly. There is a world, and Jeff, it's coming. I really believe this in the next 3 to 4 years, where the schools will compensate the athletes directly. And as part of that, there are going to be contracts in place in some way, whether that's NIL contracts or actual contracts. At that point, maybe the field levels a little bit when you don't need to keep accumulating. But until then, you are at an advantage. Those schools that have the most resources are going to be better until, and this is going to happen, it's going to happen this year, somebody in the SEC has to lose this year. Somebody in the Big Ten has to lose this year. And where's that money going to go when you do lose? To pay out the coaches. And that market still has not regulated yet, that coaching market where all these buyouts are still built in, but it's changing. You're starting to see now in both athletic director contracts and in coach contracts that the buyout numbers are starting to get a little bit more normalized. We're not there yet, but there's going to be, you're right. It's either you're going to walk off the cliff and everything's going to break, but there's too much money involved for it to go completely away. And the other thing that's going that is just reality, numbers have never been better from a TV viewership standpoint for college athletics than right now. Never been better. So as long as people are watching, the more money is being printed. All this doomsday stuff, I think, is largely overblown. Could it blow up eventually if we continue to go down this path? Absolutely. But for now, it's try and milk that cow as much as you can. And that's where, the Iowa States of the world, you just got to hold on. You got to hold on for dear life. And thank goodness Iowa State has these programs really lined up this year to do some special things.
Well, I think one thing that NIL has done a really good job of, which this feels like the positive side of it, because we talk about competitive balance as if it's a thing that has always existed or is sort of like a paragon on the hill. Ohio State and Alabama and Notre Dame and Michigan and Texas and whatever, they have won such a lion's share of the national titles over the course of the history of the sport that it's absurd. But once NIL happened, what happens is that me as a person, prior to NIL existing, now granted, I was not at this level of recruiting. I was a white running back from Central Iowa who was about 4'6" in the 40. Good for 230, but not good for fast people. So if I'm gonna play, and let's say I was a 5-star player, the monetary compensation that I'm going to be going for, because like everyone's like, oh, get your education. You don't go pro a ton. But if I'm a 5-star, my odds of going to the NFL are pretty high. And if I can go to the NFL, even if I make it for 1 year, even as like a 7th round draft pick, Brock Purdy made what, $900,000, and we say he's underpaid for 1 year that you'd be making. So if I'm going to do that and I'm going to put my eggs in the NFL basket, Well, the best pathway there are the best teams, which is Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, whatever, which is why those just became a self-fulfilling prophecies. I need to go play for Nick Saban because if I came from a middle-class family in Iowa, if I want to take my middle-class family and make generational wealth happen for them in a second, is I need to make it to the NFL. That's the best place for the NFL. But what NIL has done is I don't necessarily have to get to the NFL to make not necessarily generational money, but if I can make 50 grand as an 18-year-old and then 60 grand as a 19-year-old while I'm getting my education and then get done with that, well, this actually starts to become a pretty reasonable bargain. Now, University of Washington, I think I might want to go to University of Washington instead of going to Alabama, or I might want to go to Zach Edey, play at Purdue instead of playing at Kentucky, or I might want to go to UConn, which big basketball program. It's not necessarily the best example, but it starts to add more competitive balance where there have been more teams. Like this year, for the first time, there was like 8 teams that had a legitimate argument to be included in the playoff because all the best players didn't just concentrate themselves in Alabama and LSU and Ohio State just because that's the only way to the NFL. So like when player compensations comes, that I think is going to be a lot more of a competitive leveler than what I think it's going to be. We're like, yes, there's money at Ohio State and whatever, because if I'm a 5-star and I can see what my market value is, and I know that there's 3 other 5-stars at Alabama, but my market value is $125,000 a year as a freshman for whatever, unproven, and I could go to Akron and make that at Akron. And I could start year 1 and rush for $1,500 yards. And then I could transfer with no rules against that to Ohio State once those guys graduate. Well, that seems like a better option for me. Well, in the meantime, Akron's going to be pretty good because you have more talent there. And so like, I think the competitive balance part of it is as soon as NIL came into play. And I think once you have start to be publicly available information on salaries, because everything with the university, because most universities are state or public run universities, you then have to publish what that's worth. You could go see what Matt Campbell makes right now because he's a public university. Scott Drew, not exactly the case because it's private, but most schools are public schools. So if you're going to pay Rocco Becht, we're going to know exactly what Rocco Becht makes because it's a public institution. It has to be publicly available. So now if I'm a 5-star kid from Tallahassee that's choosing a bunch of schools, I could just Google what does the average person make? And there's going to be all this information. It's readily available. So I am so much less doomsday than I think a lot of people are because the more information is available, there are still only 22 guys that can play on offense and defense. Maybe if you add some depth, 35 guys total that are going to be playing. I don't want to go sit in a bench somewhere when I can make $100 grand going somewhere and actually play. So like, I don't know. It feels like to me, like there are enough adults in the room that when the money starts to dry up, we're not going to just keep driving the car off the cliff. And once NIL becomes compensation, it becomes publicly available, then it becomes a lot easier to negotiate. It becomes a lot easier for people to see. And I think everything starts to even out once we get there. It's just going to be a real rough ride until we get there.
Yep. Well said. Man, that was way too intellectual conversation for this podcast. Our friends at the Ivy College of Business would be very proud. Because sometimes I wonder with them is like, do you really want to hitch your wagon to Chris Williams if I'm the Ivy College of Business? I mean, come on now. But you've got an advanced degree, right? So Ivy's got it.
I wish if I could talk to 17-year-old me again, I would tell him to do 2 things. One, I was talking about intentional design. I wanted to be an architect growing up. Still do that. That'd be cool. But also get a graduate degree from the Ivy College of Business. Because the amount of stuff you can learn and just put to use in any field, substantially better. So if I could talk to 17-year-old,
you run a business now, right? How much entrepreneur skills could you? One of the best entrepreneur programs in America, right?
If I would have been able to learn what I know now from the School of Hard Knocks, like 7 years ago, just from school, would be way better. I would be 7 years ahead of where I am right now.
Hey, pal, that was fun. Aiden, thanks, buddy. I mean, that was again. We did not get into Freddie got fingered or George Strait or any of those things, but I thought this was a high level discussion. So appreciate you. What people don't know, Jeff, we did have a show together once. Remember that?
Oh my God. Yes, we did. This is MC22. We had
MC22.
What was it? Was it locker room? The locker room report, size locker room report, something like that.
They threw. I'd never really known Jeff outside of I talked to him a couple times when he was a player, and they threw us together like, guys, go do a 30-minute show. We're like, oh, what do we do here?
That was actually I think that was my first televised experience, and I was wearing ill-fitting suits, big ass polos, not really having an idea how to do what I was doing.
AKA the Steve Prohm look.
That's the triple XL polos. That was. I don't think I got triples. I did have some double XL polos. One of those double XL polos is from Kenneth Pope.
Hey, Kenny Pope. Where's he? Is he out? Is he out the game?
He's retired now. He's living down near Galveston, golfing every day. He's in his handyman or in his retired days, he's working sort of as like a handyman for just people around the neighborhood. So I still text him, talk to him all the time. I'll shoot him a text on like a Tuesday. He'll reply like 2 weeks from then on like a Thursday, as if there was no time between it. So I was like, hey, coach, ran into Chantrell the other day or whatever. Hope you're doing well. And it'll be like 2.5 weeks. Be like, hey, tell him I said hi.
It's like, what? That would
have been nice.
Been helpful
2 weeks ago
yeah.
when I actually saw him. But cool. Whatever.
Thanks, coach. Well, hey, look at us now, though, buddy. From MC22 to, carrying Williams' lunch for him, basically. So, well, hey, thanks for everybody for listening, watching. Jeff, when is your program normally for those who are unfamiliar? Because the forums, by the way, on Fanatic have been going nuts. The love, and again, I know you're not a big social media guy, so I'm telling you this. The love for Kicking It. I mean, you guys are growing. Look out. I'm just saying, like, you guys, you're doing some work over there.
Well, thank you. It comes out on Tuesday mornings. We always record Monday nights, depending on when we get a guest lined up and if somebody has to be out of town. But show comes out on Tuesday morning. And I mean, it's fun. I think what's great is I like being the host, despite the fact that I got to talk a lot during this show. I like being the host because a lot of times I can just pull the string on Grant and just let him go for a while. He's going to come up with the funniest, most off-the-wall stories. And Aiden, you want to pop in for just a second because I need you to corroborate this story. The off-record stuff that we get from Grant is too inappropriate to air at all. But God damn it, is it funny?
We're on the internet. What are you talking about?
It's mainly before we start recording, and he's just kind of like warming up his voice or whatever. And then he'll say some profanity and be like, well, you can't use that anymore. And that's kind of it.
Always used to like punctuate a story to make sure that it doesn't he'll always just say like some really inappropriate phrase right at the end of it. And it's just again, I'm not going to use one now, but like, it's nothing derogatory, but it's just kind of gross. And like, so you can't even use the story because it just finishes. It's like, it's a nice fine wine that just somebody farted in.
He is in my... He's on my Mount Rushmore of Twitter, Iowa State Twitter, just antagonists. It's, because Larry, I love Larry. We've talked about this on this pod. Larry's the best. Larry takes 6 months off, basically. Grant doesn't stop. Grant is challenging Iowa fans. He's challenging K-State fans. And, man, the guy's relentless. Now, Mahoney, you got to put your leg where your mouth is, because if you miss that field goal and K-State beats you, and you cost the We Will Collective $100,000, then buddy, we got a problem.
Tanya Harding, Jeff Galooly.
Yeah, exactly. Look out, pal. Well, Jeff, it was a pleasure, my friend. Great work as always on Kicking It, and you're a treasure for the Cycle Fanatic family. So good to see you, my friend.
Well, thank you. Good to talk to you again, and hopefully people enjoyed me as Chris Williams.
I don't know. Talk
I was watching Acuna.
Thank you, Aiden Wyatt, for producing as always. Chris and I will be back live on Wednesday. I think we're going to go at 10:30 this week or 10:45. So stay tuned for that. But for the rest of you guys, enjoy a beautiful week of weather in Iowa and roll clones.